Hey everybody, today I want to look at triangulation. What is it? What's it mean? How can you avoid it? Let's talk about that on today's Ask a Shrink. So you may have heard the term, I've been triangled into something, or I'm a victim of triangulation and you're not quite sure what that means. Well, today we're going to explore that just a little bit. Basically, it's a term that refers to somebody manipulating somebody else as a way towards personal gain. It's a form of manipulation. Well, let me give you a brief little example. So we'll come up with three names for the triangle: Andrew, Bob, and Carl. And let's say Andrew wants to communicate something to Carl. Let's say they're all co-workers. So you would think Andrew would go talk to Carl, right? Andrew goes and talks to Bob and say, Bob, would you please tell Carl this for me? So now Bob is triangulated into a conversation that really should just happen between Andrew and Carl. And depending on what that information was, depending on what's going to be said to Carl from Bob, there's many different ways that this can go. And if the person, in this case Andrew, is a narcissist and using it as a way to manipulate or control, that's when things can really get interesting and go haywire. And quite often, someone who does do the triangulation does have narcissistic traits. The reason Andrew would do this with that example is because somebody wants to control the narrative. Now, if you're still wondering the motive for why somebody would do this, it's about perhaps elevating their superiority, somehow devalue other people, maintain some sort of control over the dialogue, raise their self-esteem because they feel like I'm in charge of all this, I'm in charge of the narrative, throw people off somehow, divide and conquer. Sometimes in my videos, I talk a bit about my family background, and there was definitely triangulation going on in my family. So just for one example, I was the kid being emotionally smothered by my mom, who happened to be in a very horrible marriage to my father. And so what she would do is talk very poorly about my dad to me. Sometimes make up things, overly exaggerate. My dad was always the bad guy. Well, of course, that's a bunch of BS because my mom is 50% of that marriage and there's two sides to every story, right? So of course my mom equally had all her own traits, but she didn't want to talk about those. She wanted to focus on my dad, which naturally to a 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old kid growing up, they're going to believe what the parent is telling them. So now I'm triangulated into my parents' toxic marriage. And so it goes from there. And in this instance, and in millions of other families, if a narcissistic parent is doing this, they definitely want to divide and conquer the children, keep the siblings apart, so to speak, because the parent, the emotionally smothering parent, needs to have a golden child. There can only be one golden child, and they really don't want the children comparing notes, because a way to keep smothering the golden child is to triangulate that child in, which means sometimes hearing a bunch of nonsense about their brothers or their sisters. It's a ploy from a narcissistic parent, and it's fairly common. So if this is happening to you in your life, number one, just recognize that it is happening. Recognize the game of it. Recognize the ploys. Recognize the manipulation. If it's at work, you can see how other coworkers are being treated. If it's from a parent, you can see that a brother or a sister is not as heavily favored as another brother or sister. You can see if there's a golden child. If it's in your love life, you can tell if somebody you're dating or seeing continually tries to triangulate somebody in, perhaps to make you angry or get some emotional rise out of you. So they keep bringing up their ex. Well, she used to do this for me. Oh, I loved it when my ex would treat me this way. And so he's triangulating in the ex as a way to somehow manipulate the present woman he's dating. Could be for a bunch of sick reasons, but one reason is to make her feel guilty when she doesn't please him, because that's the message she's getting. She's getting, oh, I'm not living up to A, B, or C. I better start living up to A, B, or C. And when she doesn't live up to A, B, or C, she feels guilty. So he's really good at setting up the whole guilt trip thing here, right? So begin recognizing it if it's going on around you, number one. Then number two, just simply get out of the triangle. Don't play the game. Speak the truth, be authentic, go directly to the person that you want to communicate with. Don't use anybody else in between. Document if you need to. Basically, you're not going to get sucked into this because you're going to have very strong, healthy boundaries. Number three, if you are in it and it's currently going on, just be aware of how you're responding versus how you're reacting. Those are two very different things. A response is something logically thought out. You've assessed both sides. You've looked at the pros and cons perhaps. You've looked at the broader picture of something, the grander scheme of things, and objectively you're going to respond. That's different from a narcissist who's trying to control things, wanting you to react, which is very emotional, and you lose your train of thought and you're reacting from pure emotion, which now gives them more leverage over you. So be very aware of separating out a response from a reaction. And number 4, get some professional help, get some support. You don't want to be alone in this, especially in family situations that are very, very toxic, and parents may have been triangulating for decades. It may be hard to step out of that without some sort of support. So get some objective support from somebody who is not biased. Now, by divide and conquer, especially in family dynamics, let's use those same names. And let's say for some reason Andrew wants to diminish the status of Bob. Then he may go to Carl and say something like, I haven't known how to tell you this. I'm a little embarrassed and shy to tell you, but Bob has been talking to me about you behind your back, and they're not pleasant things that he's been saying about you. So let's look at what Andrew is trying to accomplish by setting things up this way. Andrew has now isolated Bob from Carl because now Carl's very suspect. Oh my gosh, Bob's talking about me behind my back. And in addition, Carl now thinks Andrew's his closest friend. Andrew's telling me everything. I can really trust him. He stepped out on the limb to tell me that. So now Carl has an allegiance to Andrew, and Carl somehow thinks Bob's the bad guy, and none of this may be true whatsoever. It's a tool, it's a manipulation. Triangulation is never good, it's never healthy, it's never going to help solve a problem. Always remember, it's just a way to create more damage within a family, a workplace, or a romantic relationship or something. So in any way, shape, form, or matter that you can reduce or eliminate triangulation, then you are pointing yourself in a positive direction. So thanks for watching. Please leave me some comments below if there's some examples you'd like to add. Maybe you've been triangulated to things in your life. Please subscribe to my mental health YouTube channel if you like these kind of videos. And until next week, this is Brad Shore signing off from Ask a Shrink.